Good evening and live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the sun and fun capital of the world for sure today. I'm Dr. John Stamey and I want to welcome everybody to ScaryCast. We got some great guests tonight. They do some very exciting things. So I want to get right to introducing RD and Brenda Rhodes. How are you folks doing tonight?
Hey, we're having an amazing evening. So good to be talking to you.
Well, good. Thank you very much for being here. I got introduced to you. You sent me an email, and then I asked a number of people about you, and you got rave reviews, and that was wonderful. And you're going to be at the Tennessee Bigfoot Conference coming up September 14th at the Newport Fairgrounds in Newport, Tennessee. That's going to be a blast. So we're going to have a
There-
lot of fun. So anyway, tell us a little bit about what you do because you are certainly Bigfoot explorers.
yes, sir. First of all, what Brenda and I do is have the time of our life. We could not believe when we started attempting to do this, now just about 16 months ago, maybe 17 months ago, we went out on our first trip. We have photographed dozens and dozens of Sasquatch, dogman, all kinds of cryptids. It really, even from day one, exceeded all of our expectations. We literally thought we would be out there for years before we got some, second grade blurry photo. And instead, we came home having nothing more than a Samsung Galaxy S8 active and Brenda's phone, which was worse than mine, and just not knowing what we were doing. Read a little bit and heard, saw some videos from Scott Carpenter. And so I just told Brenda, I said, hey, if we smell anything or hear anything or anything's unusual, it goes dead quiet, let's go ahead and start taking photos. Brenda did first because we smelled a very rank smell. And I'll share with you, we were in the Land Between the Lakes. And that's where our cover photo Bigfoot came from. That's where we got so many Bigfoot that day. Some of the pictures I sent you, two or three of them came from that very day, Dr. John. But anyhow, just absolutely blew our mind. We had no idea what we were doing. We were really close to other people. We began to figure out some things that most people do not know or recognize about Sasquatch. Number one, most of our good photos don't come from super deep in the woods. They come from pretty close to common areas where people are going to traverse to, sometimes with people right around. We've got some of our very best photos. But we found out that, well, we didn't find out that day because that day we thought we had photographed nothing. We had no idea that we had anything on our phones. We got back to the car, which was simply 100 yards away in a parking lot with probably a half dozen cars in it. And we got back to the car and we looked through our photos real quick, didn't know what we were doing. We had my phone was so old, Fred Flintstone could have used it. And we started zooming through those photos, didn't see anything, went home. I think some people have thought, well, hey, these guys just, I don't know, there's so much AI and CGI and all that stuff. So a week later, I was on a trip because I am so technically challenged. I married Brenda and fell in love with Brenda for a million reasons, but number one is she's better at tech than I am, which isn't saying much. But so we didn't know we had all these pictures. We wound up with 6 or 7 really good Sasquatch photos in the very first day. And what amazed us was the other thing in those photos. As we dug deeper, it began to rock our worldview. So we say on the cover of our book, this book will rock your worldview. Finding out the truth will definitely do that. But here I am a week later. I'm going to some special training because the company that I work for loves me, but I can't catch on to a simple iPad program that 90% of our company is caught onto through Zoom meetings. So they send me away to reprogram me for about a week. And I'm on this plane flight because I don't get tech. I'm looking at my old Samsung Galaxy S8 phone, zooming through those. At first, I zoomed through the photos of Brenda and I. This was a week before we got married, back this was at the end of February of last year. And I started zooming through those pictures and just having a good time and thinking about how fun that day was. And then I thought, well, I'm going to look at the pictures where we experienced that very rank smell. And when I did, my jaw literally hit the floor, chills came over me. And I thought, wow, I'm looking at some very clear facial, very, very clear brow ridge, eyes. There are multiple creatures staring straight back at me as I zoomed in. And that's just a pattern that we have followed since day one. Most of our good photographs, we have one we call the Jackson Bigfoot, one we call flat face, or you can see eyeballs and eyelids in some of those, some very good clarity. But most of those good photographs do not come when we see the Sasquatch, although we do see quite a few. Most of them come from Bigfoot we don't see that are just peeking and watching us. But that's kind of how our journey began, other than my interest for Bigfoot, which goes back years and years to when I was a teenager and stumbled upon one, I guess. I don't think anybody actually stumbles upon them, but if you'd like for me, I'll be glad to share that first experience I had as a teenager.
Please tell
Yeah,
us that story.
absolutely. So Rutherford County, Tennessee, right smack dab in the geographic center of the state of Tennessee. My grandfather lived in a little place called Las Casas, and he had a 100-acre farm. I loved his farm, man. It was paradise for me. Spent every third weekend, every summer break, every Christmas break, and every Thanksgiving break. Anytime I could, I was at my grandfather's place. I tell people, had it not been for this horrible thing called school, I'd have spent a lot more time there. But my parents kind of like me, and they like to see me from time to time, so they didn't let me stay there all the time. And I had began deer hunting, and I had a stand out in his backfield. He had 100 acres, but 39 of it were attached to his property. And then there was an additional 61 acres at the end of the road. So they were split up by about 3/4 of a mile or so. And even though both properties felt kind of eerie, I guess, to be on, especially in the dark to go out on, my grandfather's place attached to his property, it was just closer to home. So I felt a little more comfortable there, even though I would get a weird feeling a lot of times when I was out there. And even backing up from there, I remember when I was a little boy sitting out there talking to my pond, there would be these, it sounded just like somebody was hitting something with a hammer over in the woods, except it'd come in ones, twos, and threes, and it would go back and forth like there were different communications taking place. And so I remember asking my grandfather, this is probably 5 years before I had this visual encounter. I remember asking him, I said, what is that? He'd always say, well, somebody's building a barn over there or something. But my friend that was with me would look at me and say, there's no barn being built over there. It's dark. It's the evening, at least was dusk dark. And there's no electricity over in those woods. And that's nothing but just raw land, And so, but fast forward probably 5, 6 years, I'm either 12 or 13. And I'm going back to my grandfather's backfield. His place right there in Las Casas, nothing but just solid rock. He had only 100 acres. I tell people that you couldn't dig a pond to hold water on in Tennessee, probably. And but a great guy. He was my best friend. And I'm going back to that backfield. And as I go, I have to go through a logging trail. When I get through the logging trail, he had a pond dug for me, although it seldom held much water. And it was right in the middle of what we call the sagegrass field. His sagegrass field sat at the very back of his property. And I would always get up on the rim of that pond and walk around because the pond was pretty centered in the field. And it was elevated, so I was able to see so much further. And about less than 100 yards at the end of the field was my deer stand. And so I would always get up on the outer perimeter of the pond, walk around, because the sagegrass was somewhere between knee and waist high. And so it was pretty high. So I'd get up in that elevated position. I could see everything very clearly. So I'd walk around and look and see what was going on. I'd look over in the pond, see if maybe accidentally there was a little water in it. And usually there were a few deer tracks, but not too many. And I remember that day, though, I looked out in the right corner of the backside of his field, which it was two sides of the field had really thick woods. The right side had the thickest woods. I mean, I wouldn't even go in there deer hunting or squirrel hunting unless we had a squirrel up a tree, man. I would not go in that it was just too thick. And so I looked, and as I'm standing there on the back corner of the pond, probably 85, 90 yards away out of the corner of that field, I saw something and it looked like I was looking through an intense heat for just a second. It was the weirdest thing. I thought I had something in my eye. I remember actually rubbing my eye because I thought, well, it was like blurry for a second. And if you ever, the way I describe it, if you ever pump gas when it's really hot outside and you see it's like wavy, you'll see the waves that you look through that kind of refract the light in the picture you're looking at. It looked like that for a second. I never correlated that with what was fixing to happen. But out of that same corner of the field, out of the thickness came what I thought at first was a man. And I thought, my first thoughts was, he's big. I'm going to have to run him off my grandfather's property because nobody else was supposed to be hunting back there. And he's all in brown. Everything was brown. And I remember so clearly, the only thing that I could see is it looked just like, and this was in probably the early fall, maybe September, October. But I remember looking and it was like he was wearing a toboggan, and I could just see the face, which was dark, but there was no hair at all on the face. The first thing I noticed, though, is he walks out because he's in the shade at first, and he walks out of the trees, out of that kind of wavy look, whatever the kind of the where everything was, my vision was kind of fragmented or blurry. He walks out, he takes 2 or 3 steps out of the shade, and as he steps out, the sun hits him for the first time, and when it does, I realize that's not. I thought it was a guy in coveralls, gloves, toboggan. I remember thinking it's too early in the year for this, and what's this guy doing out here? But when the sun hit it, I saw hair, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" And I remember thinking the first thing I thought is, I'm looking at a Bigfoot. And I tell people, anybody that's ever experienced this, you're not trying to see a Bigfoot. You're trying to unsee a Bigfoot. You're trying to fit this. It's like there were a library shelf and there's no book for it. You're trying to cram it into any slot that you can to make this something you can wrap your brain around. And I remember watching as it walked across. The first thing that got me as it stepped out, other than the hair that I could see shining, was its gait was not like a person. It kept its knees bent. It never straightened or locked its legs. Kept its knees bent. It was almost like it was scooting. It was big steps, but it was slow and methodical. About 3 steps into that, it tucked and tilted just like that, but it kept walking the same way. It never changed its direction whatsoever. It was perfectly following the fence row, which took it straight under my deer stand. And I mean, my deer stand wasn't very high. It was about 8 feet. So that's how I got a good grip on how tall this thing was. But when it looked at me, the first time I remember I'm standing there, I've got a 20 gauge single shot shotgun with nothing but quail load in it. And I'm sitting there and I'm just shaking on the inside. I can hear my heart beating through in my neck. And I'm looking at it. And when it looked at me, I felt an impression come over me that said, "Don't mess with me and I won't mess with you. Mess with me and you'll regret it." And when that happened, I'm just totally frozen in that 45, holding that 20 gauge shotgun at a 45-degree angle. And I didn't even know what to do. I thought, was that my mind? Was that just my fear speaking to me? And it just turned its body straight back, because its body was straight, but it shifted shoulders back and it began to walk. It had extremely long arms. The arms were hanging down. It was very brown. It wasn't red. It wasn't black. It was brown. And it walked across. Probably I watched it for 45 seconds. It was about an 85-yard wide field. And I watched it, and I remember starting to plan in my mind, although I didn't move. I didn't make a move until it went out of sight. But I remember starting just to plan in my mind, when this thing goes into those woods, if it follows the logging trail, it's going to intersect me. And I know that animals like to follow existing trails. And so my thought is, there was no YouTube, there was no internet, there was nothing back then. So I didn't know how fast these things were. We've seen them so fast now, but I had no idea. And so I thought, I can outrun it. And so either I had to go the direction it just walked across to get out of there, or I had to run back the way I came and risk the possibility of it intersecting me. But I had about 100, I had about 85, 90 yards advance on it. So I'm like, I'm going to take off. So I took off running as fast as I could. And I ran. And I remember when I went through where those two logging trails intersected, and I'm just thinking, the whole time I'm thinking, I'm going to die. I mean, you just can't process this kind of thing. And so I'm just running as fast as I can. I run back to my grandfather and grandmother's house. And I tell them, I said, I just saw a Bigfoot. And they believe me. I think they knew they were out there, but they believed me. And my grandmother called it Slewfoot. She said, "Oh, Junior, she calls me Junior. She said, you just saw Slewfoot." And so that was my first Bigfoot encounter right there in Rutherford County, Tennessee, back in probably 82 or 83 is when that one took place. My second one's right, not that far from there and far more dramatic. And of course, I slept on it for years, you know, but that's kind of what got me into it right there. It's kind of hard to unsee something like that. So
Yes, yes, it is. And I saw my first Bigfoot at a friend's house. We were eating a late Saturday lunch, and I was facing toward a window, and about a 10-foot tall, hairy, reddish brown dude just walked by the window.
yeah,
It's like, good Lord. And so I jumped. I opened that door so fast, he was gone.
yeah,
And I mean, when you see one, you know what's going on, don't you?
you do. That I guess my whole lifetime has been encounters, but for a long period, I just kind of swept it under the rug. But yeah, you cannot unsee it. I also experienced the samurai chatter once back there in that same field, but that's just simply heard it very clearly, much like if you've heard the M.K. Davis Bigfoot in a Shed or the Sierra sounds like that, kind of like they sounded for a little while, very, very similar. Had no idea what I was listening to. That was later that same year, I believe. But my next experience is pretty radical and actually very much our motive. Brenda and I say all the time, and I wouldn't do any of this without her. She's my soulmate, and we're in this together. But we say all the time, the world deserves to know the truth, and here's why I believe that. My second encounter took place about 3.5 miles away from there. It was on the East Fork of the Stones River in Rutherford County. A friend of mine had sold him a boat. I was 16. He was, I believe, 29. A great guy, rugged outdoorsman. And it was just a little 14-foot V-bottom boat, and it really was a little bit too big for the water. But if anybody's familiar with that area in Rutherford County, there was a mill pond there at the time. That mill pond has since collapsed, so the water levels dropped probably 4 feet since this encounter. But my friend and I, we put in there, we were going to spend the night on a gravel bar and just kind of hopefully catch some smallmouth. We're going to spend the whole weekend there, catfish at night, and just really looking forward to it. And so we get down there on the gravel bar, we get set up, and I think we had some lines out for catfish. We reeled them in. Like I said, I was either 16 or 17. I'm not for sure, but I want to say 17 now. But we're sitting there. I do remember because we looked, we actually talked about it, but it had been dark probably about an hour. So it was about 9:30. He had a fire going. He had a very deep voice. And he looked at me and he said, "Man, it sure has gotten quiet outside." And within 10 seconds of him saying it sure has gotten quiet outside, it literally sounded as if a bomb hit the water right outside of our view. I mean, we didn't get up. We exploded to our feet. That's the only way I know to put it. When we landed on our feet, we were just both shaking uncontrollably. It was just that loud. You can't even fathom the shock out of a guy saying, and I believe that was strategic on the part of this creature, but he said it sure has gotten quiet, and then it was not quiet anymore. So we knew immediately that it had come from the gravel bar was maybe, it wasn't that long. So we were about 30 or 40 yards from the upstream end of this gravel bar on the East Fork of the Stones River. And at that point, he grabs his flashlight, and it was so pathetic. It was a horrible flashlight, those old D batteries in it. You had to shake them up and point it. And hopefully the thing would work. And we inched down toward that. He said, what, he's cursing and hollering. What in the world was that? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. And we got down there to the end of that gravel bar and we look out in the water. And even with his flashlight being so bad, this thing wasn't maybe 20, 25 feet out in the water. But we look out there and we can't see anything but these massive glowing red eyes. I mean, when I say massive, they're absolutely the size of silver dollars or bicycle tire reflectors. I mean, they are huge and they are far apart. They are 5, 6 inches apart, easy. And he's shining his light. He's leaning out there. And all of a sudden, he starts to say, my God, it's a monster. It's a monster. My God, it's a monster. And I'm trying to be rational here. And if he ever used the word Bigfoot, he never did. I thought he was talking about a water monster of some kind. And I'm thinking, this is only 6, 7, 8 feet deep. It's not big enough to support the Loch Ness monster. So what are you talking about? But we're looking at these massive red eyes. I mean, it's just huge. And this thing's looking straight at us. The longer we look, our eyes adjust. He has his flashlight on it, which isn't doing much, but it is doing something. And you can begin to make out the silhouette of the head of this creature. And only from about right here up, it's sticking out of the water. And it looks like that. I mean, it's probably sticking 16 to 18 inches out of the water. Its head is very pointed. And all we can see is just the dark outline at that point. We can see the red eyes as it moves downstream. It's fixing to move downstream. Then we got a better look at it. But this thing just sits there and looks at us, and my friend is just shaking. He's like, that is a monster. And I'm like, it's just, I knew that cows came down to get water there. And I was just trying to, we couldn't see the whole outline right now. So I'm just trying to fit this in a box that I can, trying to be rational. I said, it's got to be a cow that fell in the water or something, although cows weren't down there then. And we watched it, and here's the wild thing. So here's this massive head, just barely, and it tilts just like that. It's like it's checking us out. It's interested in us. It leans to each side. It's just looking at us. And my friend's just shaking, and we're watching this thing. And we watched it right there at that end of the gravel bar. We watched it for a good 2.5 minutes. It never moved. You could see the ripples coming in off the water because we got some of the light from the campfire where we were, but then on out there where it was just totally dark. And of course, he had the flashlight on it. But by the way, it had splashed all the way up on the gravel bar. So it was 20, 25 feet out, and there were splashes. There was waves where the water had gotten on the gravel bar as we walked up to it. And so at that point, it pushes out to the center, toward the center of the river, not all the way to the center, and it starts to stream, but it is far exceeding the speed of the water. It's just like super fast, and it's in a total zigzag pattern. And my thought was, it was like a person. If you or I were if we were in a swimming pool that's maybe 3.5, 4 feet deep, and we were pushing off with our feet on the bottom, that's the way this thing was. It was just, it was pushing off. It was just zigzagging really, really fast, and it stopped right in front of us, right in front of the campfire. We followed it downstream to in front of the campfire, and we're sitting there, and he's shaking. And at that point, we just kind of look at each other, tilts its head again like it's examining us. It's closest. This is the closest we've been. The campfire's not that far away. We can make out the brow ridge. We can make out some of the features. We can make out the nose. We can't tell detail. We can those eyes were almost self-illuminating. They were so big. And this thing, at this point, like I said, it tilted its head again. And my friend looks at me, and we just both had an epiphany. We've got a shotgun with us. So he said, hand me my 12 gauge. So he had a double aught buck in his 12 gauge. It was a double barrel, and I think it's double barrel. And anyhow, I handed it to him. He said, "Here, hold this light." I grabbed the light. I'm just shaking, holding the light, and he pulls the shotgun up to his shoulder. And the second he pulled that shotgun up to his shoulder, that big head goes blub, 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 blub. Massive bubbles come up, and this thing just totally vanishes, and it is dead quiet. And we're just left there. We're like, what in the world did we just see? We didn't do anything, or we didn't say anything for probably 10 minutes, and he's just shining his light out over the water. And then he said, well, that thing could come up out of the water tonight and kill us. He said, it's got to come up for air. And it may have. It may have went around the corner. I don't know. But it was pretty, it had to swim underwater for a long ways, probably 150 yards or so, which I know now they're very capable of doing. But he says, my friend said to me, and I don't use his name much because out of respect for his family, but he said to me, he said, we're going to take shifts tonight because that thing is going to, that could come up out of the water and kill us. Now, I'm still thinking water monster because the only term he ever called it was monster. Even though I'd seen the Bigfoot in broad daylight walk straight across my grandfather's field about 3 or 4 years earlier, I could not make the connection in my mind that that's what this was. I just knew there was something big with red eyes in the water. And so I said, you do what you want to, I'm going to sleep. And so I just kind of pushed it away. I was definitely in denial. I wasn't brave. I guess my mind just let me block. I don't know. But the next morning when I get up, he's sitting there, he's still got his shotgun over his lap. He's got the fire just blazing. And the only thing that was ever said about it again was he said it never came up for air. And at least that was his take on it. Like I said, it could have went around the corner. But we, instead of fishing the rest of the weekend, we loaded up the boat, went home, never talked about it again. He moved off pretty soon following that event. And the reason, one of the main reasons that we do this is within a year and a half, and I'm not saying that it was a contributing factor. He had other demons he was dealing with, but I know that night messed him up psychologically. It messed him up. He had PTSD. And within 18 months to maybe 2 years at the most, he'd taken his own life. And so we believe, Dr. John, the world deserves to know the truth about these creatures. Not just because I believe they can be threatening when we're in the woods. They can be threatening to young children, to families. Now, we haven't experienced much of that. We seem to get along with them pretty good and take a lot of pictures, and we leave them alone and they leave us alone. But we don't go out in the woods at night either. We don't do a lot of what most Bigfoot researchers do. We don't do wood knocks. We don't do yells. We don't do whoops. We don't use infrared. We don't use drones. And we don't use big, expensive cameras. We just use our Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra cell phones. And so that we do things a little bit different. But I lost a friend because of that. And I know that there are other people that, if nothing else, they've wondered if they were crazy or they couldn't tell their stories because there was such a stigma about telling these sort of things. The world deserves to know these creatures are out there. So that's why Brenda and I do this.
Well, I'm sorry, but I think it's pretty obvious that they're out there.
It is.
And I mean, I mean, I don't have any problem with it. Nobody really accosts me because I run 3 and soon to be 4 Bigfoot conferences. Nobody complains to me. They better not, or I'll chew them out. I mean, I will. I'll just chew them out. I'll tell them to leave me alone. Tell them to go away. Because, yeah, this stuff's real. I've seen them. I've had experiences with them that were absolutely terrifying. I had one up in the North Georgia mountains in a cabin. All of a sudden, there was no sound. It was all of a sudden it was deathly quiet. And I said, "Oh boy." I heard some rustling, and something hit that cabin with a force unlike I could not believe how hard the thing hit the cabin. And I remember the next afternoon, I go out there and I say, just wonder, let me see if I hit the cabin and see what happens. The only thing I did was hurt my shoulder. That thing was huge. And I mean, at first I thought, about mountain earthquake, North Georgia mountain earthquakes. They do have them.
Yeah, yeah.
And at first I thought that was it. But then when I heard those steps in the leaves, I said, "Oh, why me, Lord? Why
Yeah.
is this happening to me?" And the steps stopped right in front of the door of the cabin,
Mhm.
which
Wow.
which was held together with a rubber band, pretty much. I realized that, well, if he wanted to come get me, he could just open the door. He didn't want to
Oh,
get me.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
They just wanted to make sure I stayed inside because there were a bunch of them out there. But it was, yeah, I've had my experience that just scared me to death. But it's, it's what it is, and it's part of being in this world. And it's just so interesting when you have these experiences, because when you have them, you are not looking for them. If you are looking for a Bigfoot experience, I doubt if you'll ever have one. But if you're out there, something's liable to happen.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. That's, as far as our visual encounters where we actually see them, and we only see about 5 to 10% of the ones we photograph. So it's far more common to just know they're around. And in our experience, I mean, we bust a lot of myths, at least in our experience. It doesn't always get quiet. We don't always smell them. But the ones we do see, though, the visuals we've had, because we saw, and I know it's kind of hard for people to understand this. It's almost, some stuff I almost don't share because it's almost so far out there. It used to turn me off when I'm listening to people that said, "Hey, I saw this, 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 and this. I saw a dog man. I saw a Bigfoot. I saw all this stuff together. I saw, and we became those people. But I will tell you this exactly like what you just said. Most every single, I can't think of a single visual encounter where we saw one last year that it wasn't more of, I mean, we were out there trying to photograph them, but it was more, we just followed our gut. We would know in the gut, in our gut, in our heart, hey, I need to take this path instead of this one, or I need to stop here instead of there. Many times I travel with my job, which puts me all across really part of 4 states, Tennessee, Alabama, well, actually, if you count Arkansas, and Mississippi for the most part. I dip into those in Missouri a little bit, but many of the visual encounters I had, we saw 7 last year, happened when I just felt like pulling over on the side of the road, maybe always beside a river. We always find these things beside a river. Not saying they don't live at places that don't have rivers or water, or a river or lake, but most of our encounters involve water. But most of the time that we see them, it is not because we look geographically at a map, we look at Google Earth or whatever, decide this would be a good area. It's because we just know the way the old timers used to put it, we know in our knower that we need to pull over here, and then we'll look and take, and see one and get a good visual of it. And so most of our good visuals happen that way, not because, we're spending so much time in the woods. We really don't spend that much time in the woods.
And all of our adventures are usually because we're out hiking, looking for, I love flowers, butterflies, waterfalls. And so we'll go out just sightseeing. And all of a sudden, like, RD says, we'll get this sense that we've got to go this way or go that way and take a picture. And there they are showing up in our pictures later on when we look at them and zoom in. So we're out there for the adventure, to enjoy each other, enjoy nature, and they're just, they show up all the time. Dogmen, Bigfoot. We've got some cryptids that we cannot even explain what they are. It's just very bizarre, and sometimes it does get a little scary. We had one episode. I'm sure you can tell the story better than I can. We got snorted at.
Yeah, we had this one's kind of funny, and we were early on. We still had our Samsung Galaxy S8 actives, and we were just probably our 3rd or 4th trip out, and we were just blown away because at that point, about 50% of the time we went out, we were getting good pictures. I mean, I'm not talking about blob squatches. I'm talking about good pictures, and it's hard to wrap our mind around. So we go down to this near the Hatchie River here in West Tennessee, and it had been submerged in the winter, but it had kind of came out, it had dried out some, and the trail was just reopened. Brenda and I are going down through there. One of those places we just felt like, hey, we just need to go there. And I guess, yeah, I guess we had some technical difficulties there, Dr. John, but we are walking down this little trail, just 50 yards or so from our car at the end of a gravel road. Most of our experiences take place in what I call the common areas, the overlapping areas, the areas that people will come occasionally. And these things were their entertainment. I mean, they love to inspect, just like that one walking by the cabin window or the window when you were, when you were young, you saw it, the 10-footer. These things are so curious about us that they'll get close. You don't have to go that deep in the woods to find them a lot of times. I think that's maybe a little bit of a myth. I mean, I don't know how it is 10 miles in the woods because I've never been, but we find plenty pretty close to major roads and stuff. But
Yeah,
this time,
I was not a kid. That was 5 years ago.
oh, okay. Well, young at heart.
5 years ago, and I think I've seen 6 or 7 Bigfoot.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And then the one experience that I had in that cabin, I count that because I know what was going on.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're walking out through this trail and something snorted at us. And the only way I know to describe it, I've always described it, it sounded like a rhinoceros or something. I mean, it was that loud. It wasn't a Tennessee set of lungs that did it. And Brenda instantly, I wish we could have had the Guinness Book of World Records there because I know she broke the world record in the high jump and probably some other things too. She says she almost used the restroom on herself. And we just kind of landed and kept on walking. We didn't know what to do. We're just like, we were afraid, but we didn't want to turn and look at where we thought the sound came from. So we did stop a little bit down and we started taking pictures. And we got a really good picture at that point of the dogman and the dogman pup. That was our second dogman ever. Yeah. And it was, anyhow, this stuff just blows our mind, but sometimes we see something, sometimes we hear something, sometimes we smell something, and sometimes we just see an area that looks like a good area, has a good line of view. We were doing a live TikTok the other day, and there were all kinds of birds chirping. There was all kinds of noise. People were, I was complaining to Brenda. I said, can we even do a video with all this noise going on? And we got some great photos. People started calling in and saying, or commenting and saying, there's something moving in the back. We zoomed in on it, screenshotted it, and sure enough, it was exactly what they said it was. So things don't always go quiet like that. But yeah, that was an interesting experience where it literally sounded as if a giant animal of some sort snorted at us, and we get this dogman and female, a mom and I guess pup you would call it, photographed. And so anyhow, this stuff never ceases to amaze us. No matter how many photos we've got, how many of these things we've seen, it still blows our mind every time it happens.
Right. Now, you mentioned a book. What is the name of your book and where do we get it?
Absolutely. It's called The Bigfoot Finders. The best place to connect with us anyway is on our website, www.thebigfootfinders.com. www.thebigfootfinders.com. It connects you to all of our TikTok, everything. You can buy the book there. It's available on Amazon, Lulu, Google Play. Yeah, it's quite a few others. And so, but mainly people just either get it on Amazon or they go to our website and get it there.
Okay, great. How much is the book, by the way?
Sure. I think it's 19. I think it's a little under $20. Shipping and handling is going to be around 20.
That's great, and it's published on Amazon.
It is, yes, sir. And it's actually more you can get for people that are just in it for the photos. Go to our website, go to our TikTok. There are better photos there. But if you want to know how to do this, and we do tell folks, we don't encourage anyone to do this. This is really for people that are already doing it. I can't say, hey, go out and try to photograph these things because it can be dangerous. This isn't something to play with. But our book tells exactly how we do it. It tells what we look for. It tells kind of the natural side and then kind of what I call our spidey senses start tingling and we know these things are around. but it tells exactly how anybody can go out and do this. It's really not that hard once you, it amazes us at how many of these photographs we get. And I'm not talking, you know, we don't show most of what we get because I think we have A, B, and C grade photographs. And I think C grade photographs actually hurt the cause more than they help. And so, not saying everything we have is completely overwhelming and convincing, but there's a lot of stuff we don't show. But it's really not that hard to go out and get Bigfoot photographs. They're pretty interested in us. We're their entertainment.
The main thing is just to believe, and if you believe in them and enjoy yourself while you're out in the woods and be safe, you're probably going to find them too, whether it's in a photograph or have a visual. But if you don't believe, you're not going to find anything.
That's true. I had a guy on TikTok today who commented on one of our videos, and he said, wow, y'all guys just find these everywhere. He said, they're all around, aren't they? And I told him, I said, most people have been seen by Bigfoot. Maybe they haven't seen a Bigfoot, but they've been seen by Bigfoot. Because these things, if you've spent much time in the woods, these things have seen you. They're there, and they're more common than people think. So,
Well, they are. I agree with you there. Well, you know what, RD and Brenda, it has been a real pleasure having you on here. You've given some great stories, a little bit of great information about how to find Bigfoot and take pictures. I suggest you find their book on their website and order it. I'm going to go order me a copy, and we'll all just continue to have fun. Now you can find RD and Brenda. They will be at the Tennessee Bigfoot Conference, which is September 14th at the Newport Fairgrounds in Newport, Tennessee. And we're restarting it after 3.5 years. I can't wait to get it started. That was my first Bigfoot conference, and it's always been very popular. So tell everybody about it. In 2 weeks, we're going to be having the World UFO Conference in Clayton, Georgia. The thing is over halfway sold out. Can you believe that?
Wow.
wow.
People are excited about the World UFO Conference. So we're going to have a blast. We're going to have a lot of fun. And so we have a lot of fun with these conferences and hope that we spread the word that this stuff is interesting and it's probably real. It probably is. So anyway, thank you very much. And will you come back soon? I'd love to have you.
Truly our honor. It's an honor to be a part of the conference. We're just excited about what you guys are doing. Thank you for everything you're doing to kind of wake people up to the truth. We appreciate it.
I don't know. I'm just doing what I like to do.
That's right.
And
That's us.
it's kind of like going in the woods and liking the woods, and you'll see some Bigfoot. Well, I just like putting on these conferences. I've met so many nice people, like you folks, like just the speakers, just incredible people. So I've really enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll have many, many more. So anyway, thank you, RD and Brenda. We'll have you back soon here on ScaryCast. So everybody, check them out, support them, and buy their book.
Can't wait to see you, John.
Thank you, sir. Look forward to
Have a
it.
good one. Okay, bye-bye.